Shabbat Shalom. As we celebrate this last Shabbat of 2023 and look into 2024, we first acknowledge that January 1st as New Year's Day is not the most Jewish of holidays. January 1st came into being really either as a pagan holiday, or a little later, if you want to go with it, for those people who believe that Jesus was born on December 25th, then January 1st is Jesus' bris. That's kind of the most Jewish part about January 1st being a Jewish holiday. At the same time, any time to reflect on our life is a good opportunity. Any time to look ahead, to say I'm going to do better in the days ahead is a good opportunity. But of course, one of the biggest customs when we transition from one secular year into another is the idea of predictions. So with that in mind, and this notion that we look ahead to a new year and we predict what's going to happen, I want to share with you a few predictions that have been made in the past. These particular predictions come from the year 1957. I'll tell you one thing, if things keep going the way they are, it's going to be impossible to buy a week's groceries for $20. Have you seen the new cars coming out next year? It won't be long before $5,000 will only buy a used one. If they raise the minimum wage to $1, nobody will be able to hire outside help at the store. When I first started driving, another one says, who would have thought gas would someday cost 29 cents a gallon? Guess we'd be better off leaving the car in the garage. Did you see where some baseball player just signed a contract for $75,000 a year just to play ball? It wouldn't surprise me if someday they'll be making more than the president. No one can afford to be sick anymore. $35 a day in the hospital is too rich for my blood. And in one final prediction from 1957, it's too bad things are so tough nowadays. I see where a few married women are having to work to make ends meet. Predictions are a challenging thing. Who would have predicted what would happen today? Who would have predicted what happened 2 months ago? And I'll tell you, I remember very distinctly October 7th, that Saturday night, as we transitioned from Shmini Atzeret to Simchat Torah after I just found out literally at shul what had happened the morning of October 7th. Someone came up to me that Saturday night and said, Rabbi, what's going to happen? Will Israel win? What's going to happen next? I paused for a moment, my first response being, I'm neither a prophet nor a military strategist. How do I know what's going to happen next? And then I realized in that moment that what this person was looking for was not really a prediction, so much as a word of comfort. Everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. Maybe it will. Maybe it won't. But as we look ahead to a new year, we reflect on our lives and we try to predict what's going to happen next, because as humans, that's how we understand the world. That is, in many ways, how we move forward through the world. Will Israel be okay? Yes. And no. Will there be more anti-Semitism in this coming year? Yes. Will the Pistons do better next year than they did this year? There's a good chance they'll do better next year than they did this year. Will the Lions win the Super Bowl? We're not allowed to pray for miracles, but we hope for the best. What will happen in this next year? Now, interestingly enough, as I was reflecting on that and preparing for this week's Torah portion and to speak today, come across this idea that predictions are not actually a Jewish thing. Predictions are not a Jewish thing. And as Rabbi Jonathan Sachs comes to teach us, why are predictions not a Jewish thing? Because we Jews believe in free will. And the moment you have free will is the moment you're not subject to the fates of the world. And you can change the future. I invite you to turn with me in your Eitz Chaim Chumash to this week's Torah portion, Parashat Vayechi. I'm on page 298. Page 298. Here we know that Jacob is about to die. He brings his children to him for this amazing deathbed scene. And here on page 298, at the very end of Genesis 48, we read, Vayomer Yisrael el Yosef, then Israel said to Joseph, Hine anochi met, I'm about to die. But God will be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. And now I assign you one portion more than to your brothers, which I wrested from the Amorites with my sword and bow. And then we come into chapter 49. And here, chapter 49, we're going to read Jacob offer not really a blessing on each of his sons, but actually a prophecy, a prediction of what's to come for them and their descendants within each tribe of Israel. And Jacob called his sons, chapter 49 tells us, Jacob called his sons and said, Come together that I may tell you what is to befall you in the days to come. And Jacob goes on to offer a prophecy, a prediction of what is to happen to them. Now, interestingly enough, the rabbis come to entirely reject the next couple chapters of the Torah. They're not prophecy, the rabbis tell us. They're not predictions. They're just the musings of an old man wondering what's going to happen to his children. Now, how could the rabbis come to really undermine what even the Torah says here is about to be a prophecy and call them really just the musings of an old man looking ahead at the future of his kids? And Bereshit Rabbah comes to answer the question. And if you'll turn to the very beginning of Parashat Vayechi, I'm on page 293. We see an interchange between Jacob and Joseph. And Jacob, Yisrael, asks Joseph to make sure that Jacob is buried back in the land of Israel when Jacob dies. And here I'm on verse 30. Jacob says, When I lie down with my fathers, take me up from Egypt and bury me in their burial place, the cave of Machpelah in Hebron. Joseph replied, I will do as you have spoken. And Jacob said, Swear to me. And Joseph swore to him. Then Israel bowed at the head of the bed. Now, we might not think much of this as just an exchange between a dying father and his son, the father wanting to make sure he receives a proper burial. But our rabbis ask the question, why would Joseph, Jacob's beloved son, have to be asked to swear an oath to his father? Right? We see the double request. After all, Jacob says, I want to be buried in Hebron, in Machpelah. And Joseph says, I'll do as you've spoken. No problem, Dad, whatever you want. But what happens next? Jacob says, swear to me. And here in Bereshit Rabbah, we come to read an interesting comparison between Abraham's servant Eliezer and Joseph, Jacob's son. Earlier in Genesis, when Abraham asks Eliezer to go find a wife for Abraham's son, Isaac, Eliezer responds immediately by saying, I swear, I'll do exactly as you said. Joseph responds by saying, yeah, I'll do whatever you want, Dad. Now, is that simply the difference between a servant and a son and how they respond? And here Bereshit Rabbah comes to teach us it's not just the difference between a servant and a son, it's a difference between an enslaved person and a free person. An enslaved person is obligated to do whatever his master tells him to do. But a free person has choice. A free person has free will. A free person has the ability to change the future. And as a result of that teaching in Bereshit Rabbah, The rabbis of the Midrash come back to reread the original section that we read to say, in the moment Jacob, the prophet, was about to give the predictions as to what's going to happen to his children, the gift of prophecy was taken away from Jacob. And what came out was merely the musings of an old man. Because we don't want prophecies to come true. We don't want prophecies to come true. And in the Hebrew Bible, prophecies are really a warning. And if the prophecy comes true, it's because we've failed to heed the warning that the prophet is giving us. We have free will. We have the ability to make a difference. We have the ability to change fate, to change destiny, to change what is seemingly going to happen. And so as we continue now into 2024, we recognize we're in a world that in a lot of ways celebrates victimhood. We're in a world that celebrates victimhood. And often what we see is people competing over who's the greatest victim. Judaism stands in stark contrast to that reality. Judaism comes to say is, in the moment you can lament, but you cannot permanently stay in a state of lamentation. What are we supposed to do in the midst of tragedy? The Talmud tells us we reflect on our own lives, and we ask what we've done wrong to bring on the tragedy. While others may be at fault as well, we look at our own lives and reflect on our own situation to say, what could we have done different? What could we have done better? Judaism rejects the idea of permanent victimhood where we are constantly blaming somebody else for all of our problems. And instead, Judaism comes to teach us in the Torah that we'll begin to think about receiving in our freedom in just a couple parshas from now. Judaism tells us not of what is owed to us, not of what we deserve, not as what we're entitled to, but Judaism comes to tell us of our obligations. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. You shall love the stranger. And when we focus not on what we may deserve, but rather on our obligations toward other, then we take our place as free men and free women to change the future. We speak not of entitlement, but of obligation. We speak not of predictions, but of our ability to change the future through our actions. What will happen in Israel in this next year, in 2024? I don't know. But I know that I'm going to do my best to bring not one, but 2 trips from Congregation Shaarey Zedek to Israel. And I hope that you'll join me on those trips. What's going to happen with regard to anti-Semitism in the future? I don't know. But I know that with every ounce of our congregational strength and with everything that we have within us as individuals, we have to rise up to combat anti-Semitism. We have to stand up to the hate. What's going to happen to the Pistons and the Lions? That one's beyond my control. But we're going to go see the Pistons tonight, after Shabbat. There's a lot that's going to happen to us in the next year. Sadly, some of us who are here now will not be here next year. There are people not in this room right now who will be. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that as long as we have each other, and as long as we each fulfill our obligation toward each other, and toward our brothers and sisters in Israel, and toward Jewish people everywhere around the world, then somehow, some way, everything's going to be okay. Adonai ozi amo yitain, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. May God bless each of us with the strength to use our free will for good, for righteousness and for justice and for compassion and for love. And in so doing, may God bless each and every one of us and Israel with peace. And let us say together, Amen.